in conflict, there are 3 phases to the game. The first is the corporate planning phase. That's where we select our dice and put them in the resource sector for the future and roll them and find out what our resources are. Phase 2 is the execution phase, and that's where we actually spend the dice and activate those dice to affect change on our own boards or on our opponent's boards. And then the third phase is the resolution phase, which is where you clean everything up, put all your dice that are damaged away, and all the dice in your corporate sector back where they belong. We're going to start with the corporate planning phase, and this is where you just select dice and determine what you're going to do. So you'll take them from your corporate sector, whatever dice you're going to roll, and put them up in your resource sector. Now, not to get into super in-depth strategy, but there's reasons why. I mean, you don't want to put yourself too low here because, for instance, if Kenny had a surgical strike, he could actually take these 2 dice out, and if ever, even if I'm activating dice without dice in my corporate sector, I would lose. But in this case, the more dice are in your resource sector, and the types of dice that are in your resource sector determines initiative. And I don't want to do something like this, give him initiative. So I'm going to go ahead and sacrifice, because he doesn't have a straight attack. It goes to the most important dice, going down to the least important dice, starting at the top. So political, espionage, economic, and military. And because he would have a political die, he would actually have the lead and get to activate first. And I just can't have that happen, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Why? And the next thing, because I can't have you just lock me down. So I'm going to go ahead and roll this, and he's going to go ahead and roll that, and we'll do it at the same time.
Alright.
Oh, my dogs. Alright, this is the execution phase, or the phase where you actually play the dice. And the first thing that happens in the execution phase is you reserve any dice that are reserve actions. And there's these nice little helper tokens that you're going to have in the game. And I believe Kenny has a reserve action. So what happens is you'll spend the cost associated with the reserve, which is the number in the upper corner. You're going to put it in your reserve sector, and there it sits until you need to use it. So go ahead and say what you're doing.
Alright, so right now I have the reparations action and the political dice. And it costs 0 to reserve this. And what this does is it will allow me to make any attack actions made against me cost 2 more resources from this infrastructure. But if I chose not to reserve it, I could use it as 2 additional resources to actually power other abilities. In this case, I don't have any, so I'm just going to reserve it for a little bit of protection.
And that he got to do that even though I have initiative, because reserve actions happen before initiative. The person who holds the initiative actually acts.
And
so,
they're simultaneous.
Yeah, and so everyone playing would do their reserve actions first. And so I'm first, so I'm going to go ahead and attack. This attack costs 0. It's just a simple strike. And basically you can damage 1 location on each of the opposing players' Megacon sheets if you're playing with more than against more than 1 person. And what you'll do is, because it's not surgical, I have to roll randomly. Now he can play that on me and make me spend 2 resources, but he probably won't because he sees I have plenty.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it.
Alright. And I will damage your 6.
Ooh.
Oh.
It's not good.
No.
So, if he damages a location that has no dice in it currently, then that location gets locked. So I would put a lock token over it, and any dice that would go there are going to end up instead being damaged unless I unlock it.
And how you unlock a die is you actually damage a die in your corporate sector. And it's very important because it's the corporate sector. If I would have rolled a 2, he would have had to remove that die because that's what I rolled. But I rolled a 6, there was no dice there, so I lock it, which puts him in real trouble because he was going to probably use those dice to spend to buy a die, and now he's going to have to damage a die.
I'm going to choose to damage an espionage infrastructure dice to remove the lock token.
And so, looking at areas, on the corporate sheet, the damage pool is to the left of the player board, and the spent pool is underneath the player board. So that was my turn. Your turn.
Alright, and since now the lock token's removed, I'm going to spend these 4 resources to buy a dice. And I'm going to choose
An asset.
An asset, sorry. And then I'm going to choose the economic asset die.
Any die you buy, any asset you buy is put in your spent pool, and then in the resolution phase, you'll move it back into the corporate sector.
Yeah, and I didn't say so, but it costs 4 infrastructure resources to buy any asset die.
Yeah, infrastructure dice are simple. They're the simple yellow dice. They have a 1 or a 2, and that's how they work. Buying an asset die costs 4, unless you also downsize, which is damage an asset. And so, for instance, if this military die was here and I hadn't spent it, I could spend 3 and destroy this military die to buy another die that I needed. In this case, I have plenty of resources, need plenty of resources, so I'm going to go ahead and spend my 4, and I'm going to go ahead and buy another military die. Oh,
I don't
boy.
like this. I'm going to talk to the council about this.
Right. And so you only can buy 1 asset around, and so basically we're both done.
Yep.
So since we both passed, all the dice in your resource sector come down to your spend pool. Any reserve actions will stay in reserve because you can use them later. And we then take the dice in our spent pool and move them back up to the corporate sector. Now, just because you start with yellow dice in a place doesn't mean you have to put yellow dice back there. I could do this if I want to. Not that it's not that big of a deal. The difference is if I choose to take these dice and leave these dice there, I can't put any political dice in that particular area because there's no space left. So he moved his dice back, I moved my dice back. At this point he has 1 dice reserved and he's taken 1 damage. I have 0 dice reserved and not taking any damage. You're saying, well wait, you have a white die here. This white dice is a leadership die. It is used 1 time unless you have an ability to restore it. It's a one-time use where your leader, your CEO, comes up and makes a decision and affects the game in a very particular way. When you're going to use a leadership die, you move it to the resource sector and you'll roll it if you choose to, like everything else, and that opens up another spot in the reserve sector. But up until you use that leadership die, your reserve sector only has 2 spots open. So that was our refresh phase, or our resolution phase, and we'll move to the top of the next round. And the first thing we do is adjust the time on this D10. It's the second round. The next thing we do, if you're following along, we select our dice and move it up to the resource sector.
Alright. And this time I'm going to add my leadership dice.
And I'm going with 2 military and 4 infrastructure.
So at the start of this turn I allocated all my dice from the corporate sector to the resource sector, but this time I'm going to pull one of my leadership die into the resource sector as well, and I'm going to use a corporate ability called Kir Petrovic, the People's Hero. So when I use this power, which is USCR exclusive, it costs nothing. I can choose to not roll it, and if I do so, it allows me to use my special Mercs contract ability, and then if I have enough resources, I can then reserve my leadership die again, therefore not having to waste it.
And so in this case, he's not going to roll his leadership die. It's going to stay there and activate a special ability. And so in this case, he still has 5 dice to my 6, so I'm still going to have initiative. And he's only going to roll these 4 dice and not this leadership die. My dice.
Pick up my 4.
And, ooh, oh.
I don't like that. I don't like those sounds.
I'm just. So let's see what I got. I got good resources with my infrastructure dice. I also have a basic strike that will cost me 1, and I have the Mercs Yellow Jacket for the CCC. It's a reserve action, so I'm going to go ahead and pay the 3 to reserve it. Now you're saying, well, there's no 1 here. If you pay for something, you have to use all the resources on this die. So even though the Yellow Jackets only cost 3 resources, I'm going to have to spend 4 to reserve it. And so I reserve it, spend my 4, and this is what my Mercs contract does. It's when I am targeted by an attack this round, the attack instead is directed at the opponent of my choice, and then both the attack die he's using and my die are discarded, but he still has to take the attack. And so, for instance, if he would attack me with a strike, he would have to take a damage, then his attack and my Merc helmet are sent to downsizing.
Well,
do you have any reserve actions?
I do not. I have a leverage ability, but my political die is currently tied up into the reserve sector, so I can't use that.
Then I'm going, because I still have initiative.
Okay.
I'm going to attack, and I'm going to spend 2 to do it, even though it only cost me 1.
Right, and I'm going to increase the cost of it by 2.
Which means I would have to spend 3, and I'm going to go ahead and spend 3. This die that he had in reserve.
It's going to go down here.
And I have to spend a lot of resources just to get a simple attack off, but I might as well.
Oh, whammy. So I'm going to damage one of my infrastructure dice so it's hit my resource sector.
And it's your turn.
It's a great sound effect.
Yeah.
Yes. So even though I don't like this, I'm going to do it anyway. Kir Petrovic doesn't like the way you've attacked his people, so I'm going to have to do the Chicana ability. I get to damage an opponent in one location of my choice, and I could spend 4 resources, since I used it earlier, to bring him back into reserve. But since Brian damaged my resource sector, I can no longer bring him into reserve. So I'm going to lose the hero dice, but hey, whatever. I got to get this attack on.
I'm not going to spend my military die in this case, so you get to select which place you're attacking.
Alright.
See, I could use my Merc ability to have him damage himself, and his leadership die goes away and my military die goes away, but I don't want to do that, so.
Alright, I am going to choose to damage... I will hit your number 2 and lock it.
So what's happening is, if he would have selected 3, 4, 5, or 6, I would have had to remove a dice from that sector, because those dice, there's dice there. Since he selected 2 and I have no dice there, this sector becomes locked. Now what happens with a locked sector? It means if I had any political dice up here to spend, I couldn't spend them. And more importantly, when I go to restore dice back into an area, it's locked, and so I can't put any dice there. So I'm going to go ahead and damage a die. If you have a lock on your board, you can choose to damage any die in your corporate sector to remove that lock. But it's a choice, and I'm going to remove this die, and this lock will go away.
Kir Petrovic did his thing. I'm going to put the leadership dice in the downsizing because I can no longer use it. Let's see. I don't have enough resources to actually buy something unless I downsized my economic dice.
So why would you do that?
But I'm not going to.
Yeah. So you're passing and I'm passing?
Yes.
All right, very good. Now we go, and we'll just move through it pretty quickly now. So this stays here. You're damaged as you're damaged. His resources are going to go to his spent pool. And then we relocate.
Okay.
And if that lock would have remained here, I couldn't put a die here. All right. Advance the round.
Round 3. Oh, that military dice. I don't like it.
Full boating it.
Okay, well, if you're full boating it, then I'm definitely going to because I've got political power.
And so I don't want to get to the point where I could be out. So I'm not going to put these two up there. If I put one up there, I would have the initiative. But as it is, I don't want to risk that. So I'm going to leave these here. He has 5 dice. I have 5 dice. It's a tie. So it goes to who has the better dice from the corporate sector. And he has a political die and an economic die. And I just have a military die. So he's definitely going first.
Let's go over there. It was yours.
So we roll, but he's going to have the initiative.
Yes. Oh, that's expensive. Maybe not, though. Okay, so for my initiative, I have red tape out here for my political die, but it costs 5, and I don't have the ability to actually do anything with it. I could do it, but I don't want to get rid of my economic die. Instead, I'm going to use my leverage ability, which costs 1 resource. And what it does is it allows me to turn one of my political dice in my sector to any face. And I'm going to turn it to legislation.
So my turn to go. I will go ahead and attack with 1.
All right.
Doing the damage.
I know, I don't like it.
Dinking in. Ooh.
Ooh, that's not good. Well, he hit me in the economic section, damaging one of my infrastructure dice.
Your turn.
But now it's time to talk to the government and say that these attacks are kind of unwarranted. So, I will do legislation. It costs 2 infrastructure dice, or 2 resources to activate. And what it does is it allows me to choose a location on my opponent's corporate sector and place a lock token next to that location. So, I am going to lock his spent pool.
Well, that's
cool. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to lock 5. Because I just don't like the military attacking me all the time.
So, the first thing he gets to do with that is select a location in the corporate sector, and that location gets locked. Now, I basically have to damage a die, because if I don't, this red die can't go back into the military. But I'm going to wait, because the second part of it is...
I then get to roll the d6 and lock another location. And this is where I'm hoping it locks the spent area, or the resource sector would be good as well. And instead I hit the economics. That's not bad because I'll still do some damage. That's the 2 locations that he only has dice in, which is good for me.
So I can't damage both of these dice, or I lose, to get rid of these lock tokens. So I only can do 1, and I want my military die to come back here, so I'm going to go ahead and damage, I'll damage the die, my infrastructure die in the military area, get rid of this lock token, and that means my economic location has to remain locked, which means this die can't get moved anywhere, and no dice can come back here. I still have resources. I can buy another die. I was going to buy an economic die, but that doesn't do me any good now. He really hurt me. So I'm going to go ahead and use my corporate ability, which is AMM, which is Recover. I can restore a single infrastructure dice from my downsizing and add it to my spent pool for 3. So I'm going to spend 3 and move one of my infrastructure dice there. And so you're done with your 1 resource and I'm done with my 1 resource. Yes. So we go to the spent pool and then we restore. Now once again, I can't put any dice in the lock sector. And if I wouldn't have damaged my red die, I couldn't have put any in the military. So that's me.
Alright. Alright, I got my dice reallocated.
So we move ourselves to turn 4. Now, because I'm locked, I can't move this infrastructure die. So I'm going to move these 3 in the resource sector. And those 2, and that's what I have.
Okay, I'm moving 2 infrastructure dice, my political die, and my leverage die. Or my economic die.
Yeah.
It's a leverage. I'm just assuming it's leverage.
So I feel like I have Kenny on the ropes. And
yeah, it feels that way.
If I can push it right now, I can possibly break him. So I'm going to go ahead and move my leadership die into my resource sector, which guarantees me initiative. And I'm full. He has 4 dice there. Then after everyone has placed their dice in the resource sector, this lock token gets removed automatically. And now we're ready to roll again.
Alright, I need some good rolls here. Red tape, what do they think, I'm made of cash?
Hefty bags.
Yeah. Alright.
Alright,
maybe I am.
My leadership die is called Ambitious Move. This die counts as 2 dice for determined initiative, so it's not going to help me much. It's just a sad kind of waste of, I already had initiative. But I have initiative, I'm going to go first. Are you reserving any dice?
I actually do not have any reserve actions, so I can't.
So I'm attacking with a free one.
Those free ones.
Did we move this up?
We did not, it's for round 5.
Very good. So I attack. 4.
What is it with you?
Bam!
Why do you hate my economics?
Because it's the way to hurt the USTR, I guess.
Yeah.
So this is spent.
He damaged one of my infrastructure dice, leaving 1 in my corporate sector. We're not feeling good. But I'm going to spend 1 die and use my leverage ability, which allows me to turn a political die to any face I want. It's the best thing in the world. So I will move it back to legislation, because apparently my talks with the Senate has not done any good at all, so I'm going to go back to him.
Well, I'm going to spend 4 dice, 4 resources, and buy an espionage die.
No,
put the final touches. Instigate.
I don't like this. So, now I can use my legislation die, and you remember what it did last time. It does awesome stuff. I'm going to spend the last of my resources to talk to the government again.
You're locking military.
I'm locking blue.
Oh, no!
Yeah, to make sure you have to do something to get that blue dice in there.
Right, and?
And now I'll roll and pray that it goes into red. I'd also like a...
I wanted to go into 1 is what I wanted to go into.
It's not going there. Don't do it. Don't do it, dice. Yes.
So it hits 4, it locks 4.
Yep.
Well, I don't have any economic dice, so I don't necessarily care if this is locked. I'm going to go ahead and damage this infrastructure dice so I can unlock the espionage dice, so when it's time for me to put my dice back there, I can restore it. You're done, I am done. My leadership die didn't really help me too much. It goes to downsize. You only get to use it 1 time. And we put our dice back to the corporate sector.
Yeah, it's important to note now that I know that he has that Mercs contract there, and I know he can damage anything, I'm just trying to attack him politically at this point, because they're not attack dice, so he can't attack me back with it.
Yeah, there's some key words to know about. Like, if it's an attack, it's an attack. If it's... it can have reserve, it can have finance, it can have espionage, it can
Control.
have intrigue. And so this helps me prevent people who are using capital A attacks on me. But that's okay, I have a possible solution for that. So we're going to go with round 6.
Oh boy.
Yes. And we pick our dice. And now I really have them on the ropes.
Yeah, this isn't good. I basically can only put a couple dice up because I can't... And it's still a risk, because if he gets a surgical strike and can power it, he could eliminate me.
So if he ever has no dice left in here or can't put any dice in his resource sector, I win. So the key here is I win.
No, I don't like that.
All right, I'm good.
I'm talking to the government again.
All right.
Oh my gosh, that hurt a little bit.
Oh no, Kitty.
Did you get a surgery?
I did.
And you have initiative.
I have initiative.
I don't have a reserve action.
So I'm going to spend 4 and my surgical strike. And what surgical strike does, it costs 4, but it allows me to choose 2 locations on my opponent's Megacon sheet and damage both of them. I'm going to pick 2 and 5.
Those are the last 2 locations I actually had infrastructure dice, and so you destroyed them.
And I won.
Making my corporation go into the dust.
All right.